You're listening to Tune Dig, a conversation between two lifelong friends about the power of music, one album at a time. I'm Cliff Seal.
And I'm Kyle Stapleton. Each episode, we talk about a single album in depth, unpacking it through conversation to understand what makes it worth appreciating, and learning a little bit about life along the way.
If you're listening for the first time because we're covering an artist or a record you love, we promise you'll learn something new or gain a new perspective by the end of the episode.
And if you've stuck with us for multiple episodes, you know by now that you're bound to expand your horizons as we share clear entry points for artists you may never have tried to get into before.
Today we're talking about Expensive Shit by Fela Kuti.
I was stoked and now am more stoked that we decided to talk about Fela.
Yeah.
One of the easier ways I think we can use to kind of kick things off here is when we were, as we've discussed before, we were trying to kind of come up with like, what are the kind of central things that we can focus on that draw out a lot about this record? And you said that the more that you get into music, the more Fela's name comes up because he's like a musician's musician. And that's totally true. But I think we started talking about this and wanted to kind of push it even further. And especially for anybody who is not immediately like overwhelmed with visual and auditory sensations after hearing his name. Okay. Because let's just say it this way, whether or not you are a musician or even care that much about music, you should still know about Fela Kuti. 100% of anybody who is interested in music, like, so turn that screw back on, you should know his music and his story. And to some degree, if this Tune Dig project is some sort of educational thing, I will admit some amount of failure for having to wait this long to get Fela Kuti. Honestly, because between him himself, the inimitable man, and Africa 70, his band, like, we have decades of things to talk about. And so really the best thing we can do is just bring you a big chunk of Fela, which we have chosen to be Expensive Shit specifically. But we're just going to kind of pick this up and set it down at your feet and really, really encourage you to pick it up and learn.
And don't feel bad about not knowing or not having tried for any reason to this point. However you got here, we're glad you're here. I was really interested, and I'm sure we'll reference it a lot, the documentary Finding Fela that came out in 2014, right at the outset. So they're doing a Broadway play about his life and his music. And multiple people say Fela was our like secret. Mm-hmm. He was the one that was all of our favorite that nobody talked about, kind of on purpose. And that was, only a decade ago or whatever. So
despite him being literally the most famous musician in Africa.
Right.
Like for an extended period of time.
The Nigerian and or African Beatles, for sure. So Cliff mentioned we picked a very specific record. Step one is, okay, I've heard of him. Now what? Step two is you go to Spotify and you pull it up and you see a nearly bottomless pit of 2, 3, 4 song records that are 15, 20, 30 minute tracks. And you're like, oh God.
Spotify does not know how to categorize any of these things. They're just like, they're singles. Okay, yeah, sure, dude.
EPs.
Yep.
35 EPs. And then, all right, you cross both of those humps and you start to play something and it's the song that never ends. It's a groove that goes forever and you don't know where it begins and ends. And right when you start forgetting that you're listening to music, he starts talking or the chorus comes in. That was great. I got more than I bargained. I did not know that you were going to, if I'd asked you to do a Fela impression, never in a million years would you have done it. And you just did it offhand.
The real impression would have been waiting for 7 minutes and then doing it.
Ranting unhinged for a really long time about the police or the government. That's where we really would have gotten a Fela impression.
Yep.
So without context, I can say for the two of us personally, it can be hard to develop a relationship to this music. There can be barriers to entry at first. However, if you will take a little bit of time to commit to this thing because people are convincing you to, I'm not even saying it's an acquired taste. It's pretty immediate once it clicks. Once you know the story And once you get a sense of where the groove is coming from, it is almost impossible not to love this music with your whole DNA.
Yep, 100% on board. I think I texted you at some point while we were focusing on this record and told you, like, now I've gotten to where that little at the beginning of the song, it just like makes me happy.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm doing, it gives me this new, fresh, top of the morning type feeling all of a sudden. And it's just like, that is not what I experienced the first time I tried to do a fella anything. What you're saying rings true for me. It went from, I don't get it, to, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. No, I get it.
And we talked a few episodes ago a lot about Erykah Badu and Raising Vibrations. And if you Google Erykah Badu Fela, you'll see that she compiled a box set, one of the 5 box sets of his records being reissued, and called him literally a fucking genius. So there's a through line from that record back to his catalog. But it is Pavlovian. You're absolutely right. The second that you hear the guitar on Expensive Shit,
Or that little block in the background that they start hitting.
yeah,
Yeah.
or the way that it comes in kind of softly, a little more like an ocean tide on Water No Good Enemy, like you kind of roll into it. Either one of those are it's a mood lifter immediately, and it's not because it's like intended to be light, easy breezy,
Exactly.
yacht rock. It's diametrically the opposite. But you need the groove to lock in with and to give you energy, and it's so worthwhile, man. Definitely, once you pop on this thing, you won't stop.
Yeah, and you got to approach Afrobeat, which is just everyone's word for Fela Kuti being awesome and doing things that doesn't sound like anybody else.
It's one half step less bad than calling it world music.
World music is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. So this is not close to that. So it's important to, I think, approach Afrobeat from, well, I'm especially talking to anybody who doesn't feel very familiar with the genre. If you do, ignore me and go to some other podcast about Afrobeat, because we're trying to launder Afrobeat right now to a bunch of people who haven't heard it, right?
Not in a way that David Byrne did at all, please and thanks.
But to your point, Kyle, about like sitting with it, like this music is a totally different kind of use of music.
Yeah.
Our like more American equivalents, I think, are like you need to get towards funk. You need to think about maybe even from a physicality perspective, electronica.
Yep.
Or like drone.
Yeah.
Anything that causes you to experience like a lot of physicality as a part of the music. Not like I'm in a club, we're playing a bunch of songs, I'm dancing to them. In that situation, you're in the club and music is playing. What we are talking about here is you are in the music that's playing.
Right.
You're not entering a separate space where music is coincidental. This is a full-on, everyone is in this moment. And the reason these songs can last so long and feel so long is because they are designed to be experienced. Like there was even some joking about basically Fela would stop playing songs once he recorded them because that would be the end of developing this song that they had otherwise been playing live for a long time. And I don't know that that literally was true, but that was definitely kind of a part of the ethos of like the funk aspect of like jam it out, jam it out, jam it out. Oh, we got a better version. Jam it out. Get a little different. And like all of these become this kind of constellation of what the song is, and then it gets left behind.
Our relationship with music has been so changed by the advent of recording. If you go back and like, I'm going to be the guy that's like, I went to grad school. If you read Theodore Adorno, was like one of those things that I didn't know I needed to help me in the ways that I think about music. I think other music critics that I've read, he's still the sort of high watermark of being too pretentious and high-minded and like purist and absolutionist about what music is. But I think if you love music enough to listen to multiple episodes of this podcast and endure the two of us, I think you're also the type of person who would want to read Theodore Adorno. And he's the type of person that's like the experience of a written piece of music or improvised piece of music loses its fidelity immediately when you are out of the moment in which it is being created, right? He would be appalled by streaming, I'm sure. But I think Fela is a great representation of that sort of like get back to the timeless experience of how we have created and shared a communal experience of music throughout history. Like it goes way back further than the past, 50, 60 years of the way that it has existed essentially to be commodified, right? This is music as part of building a society. Truly, it's culture and ties into this, like Fela was as quotable a dude as ever there were in this life or the next. But he had really strong ideas about everything, especially about the how and why of their music getting made.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, as far as Africa is concerned, contrasting it with the origins and reasonings of Western music, music cannot be for enjoyment. Music has to be for revolution. So one of the cool things that I think happens as you fall in love with this band, this entertainer and musician, these minds, it kind of low-key rewires your brain and your consciousness into something more radical and revolutionary. Like there were so many instances when I was watching the documentary or really starting to try to study the lyrics, like Fela was the punkest motherfucker there was, man. Like this is the epitome of punk rock to me, everything about this story. And in our show notes, trying to distill it to the main idea and then the major points that we want to hit. Like we try not to overscript it, but I have two main points that I put in here. Point one, this man's life was fucking crazy. And two, this music is fucking unreal.
Yep.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. Have a great evening. Enjoyed digesting those two things.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. This record is good.
So where do you want to start on this man's life?
I think we can start in any number of places, but it'll be a journey through, we might as well kind of like say this now. There are aspects of Fela's life and specifically his ideals and treatment of women that is wrong and quite possibly abusive. And I say quite possibly not because I'm really running interference, but just because I don't know, we consumed a lot of content about this, and the way that people talked about it wasn't okay, but we're not entirely sure the extent of it. And so we're not ready to kind of condemn him forever.
Cast aspersions.
Yeah. And so I think that's worth keeping in mind here because, I mean, especially this day and age, this whole idea of like, can we carry a person forward who did things that weren't okay? Is that something that's even worth talking about or platforming? So I think probably what we can say here is you will be able to see through some of the context and story here why this story is worth telling, why Fela Kuti is worth talking about, specifically why Africa 70 is worth talking about, why this record is worth talking about, why Nigerian corruption is worth talking about, and why many of the things that he did do, though fucking crazy, were good, benefited people in a lot of ways, made a lot of change happen. And no one has to take the perspective in a life of saying all the good things that happened are moot because the person who did them also had bad ideas or did bad things. So we don't have to excuse things one way or another. What we're going to talk about instead is just how absolutely nuts and relentlessly he was pursued by his own government just for calling out corruption, and then how he started especially digging in after some monumental situations and just flipped the entire thing all the way over into, I'm literally going to say your name now.
Yeah.
I'm going to name names actively in music.
Yeah.
And so when, like, to me, that's an important kind of ball to try to wrap up because, you talked about how he approached music and how this, his band is huge, right? This whole collective of people. And then he lived in a commune on top of that he ran like, so he's always in a community and in collective with other folks. And so I think it's important to be able to see all of those pieces and understand that context so you can really fully appreciate the absolute like magnitude of this person's influence, but then the influence of the people that he influenced. All the way from like his parents and their influence on him, all the way down to how he influenced everybody else, got influenced by James Brown, influenced by Black Panthers, and then went on to influence people for decades on because he was unafraid. So that's the best I can do with that little ball of gnarliness. But I think it's important to bring up.
All necessary. Also worth calling out explicitly the governmental sort of socio-political context he was in the wake of colonialism. Hello, white Westerners.
Second time I went to graduate school. Got it, buddy. Go ahead.
I know, what a fun lead into a sentence. Y'all seen this? Y'all heard about this? They done came over in their boats. So after kind of pushing back British colonial rule in our parents' lifetimes, like the late 50s, early 60s.
Jamaica is recently independent, y'all.
We're
still in the times.
Like the civil rights photos should be in color, not black and white, because that's how recent it was. Yeah, all of that. But just gobsmacking.
Yeah.
So kind of in the vacuum of that colonial rule, Nigeria in the late 60s experienced an absolutely brutal civil war. I guess the Civil War started earlier than that, followed by decades of military rule. And scarily, kind of some of shades of things that we're seeing in America in terms of a militarized police force owned and corrupted by oil wealth. Surprise, surprise. There's rampant capitalism at the center of a big societal problem. Who knew that money made things bad?
At the very least, the concept of capitalism playing out in the form of like greed and opportunism,
right,
everywhere where it shows up, regardless of how they set up their markets.
Right. So interestingly, somebody said in the documentary, which can't stress enough that you watch if you're at all interested, that there would have been no need for a Fela. Like no Fela would have arisen had it not been for the way that oil ravaged Nigeria. Right. So there's sort of a need for, I don't know if there's ever a need for an iconoclastic type figure to rise. You know, you and I have talked and read about cult behavior and human tendencies toward cult behavior and like the need for authoritarians and so like kind of celebrity worship and all the weird things we do attaching and projecting to people who ultimately are imperfect, right? But the symbols or the icons of people. So Fela kind of comes out of this void and has this incredible young life story. He's from a well-to-do Christianized family. His mom is a women's rights activist, like one of the most prominent feminists and progressive voices really on the continent of Africa. And so he comes from this like distinctive lineage of well-known, meaningful people. And his older brother goes to London and studies to be a doctor. And Fela goes also to try to do that. And then immediately was like, nope, hard nope, this is not for me. So his brother was like, you need to find something else to pour that same energy to. And so he gets into music composition. I think it's very important for me to note that like, as much as he is, but somebody said this in an article, and I hope that I can find it again and we can link it up, that he's less like Africa's Bob Marley and more like its Handel, because he is trained in music composition and theory. So whatever you think about the grooves of these songs, regardless of what we're able to convince you of, like this man is a sophisticated musical mind.
Yeah.
And a very talented multi-instrumentalist as well. There's an anecdote about how he goes essentially to an open mic night in London and he tries to play trumpet and improvises totally in the wrong key and out of time. But then you see these later videos of him playing the tenor sax and he's a ripper. He's like an objectively good player. So Fela in another context would have been a successful jazz musician in Western American jazz. I have to believe that, but chose to take on this stuff that was so much bigger. You talked about the James Brown influence. I thought it was really interesting and sort of like a central tension of Fela's life, the influence that specific women had in his life, right? So he occasionally had regressive or confounding views on women and gender roles and whatever. But he went to America and was in, I think, Los Angeles, I think it was on the West Coast, and met Sandra Isidore, who had heard his like London recorded output and what he was doing with his band. And I thought it was really interesting that she was like, hey man, it's the late 60s in America. look around. All of these people are looking to Africa for meaning around their origins and solidarity. And I think you need to be like a little more studied and measured and thoughtful about the kind of art that you're putting into the world. And so she gives him Malcolm X. She gives him Kwame Ture. She gives him all this exposure to the Panthers. And he starts like getting class consciousness essentially. But it was all because this woman like put the books in his hand and he had a moment. But he also saw James Brown and he saw Bootsy Collins playing bass, and then that kind of like feedback loop came back to Africa, and he was never the same after that. So the seeds for Africa 70 were planted. First Nigeria 70, then Africa 70 with a C, then Africa 70 with a K. Was basically like he's an extremely worldly and studied dude. Like he studied in London, he traveled to America. So it was really interesting that he had this kind of worldly perspective. He was very exposed to Western culture and knew instinctively how to use the trappings of it, but to not get Westernized. He was like, I need to do the Africa version of this. It's hard to know with so many years past now, how much of that was really intentional and forethought and how much of that just like came out of his instincts. I think there were different camps who kind of saw different modes of thought with Fela, but the fact is that it happened and it's pretty rad.
You've brought us up to what eventually became kind of a feedback loop between funk and Afrobeat, actually, because like then James Brown starts learning from Fela Kuti, and then back and forth, and they're inspiring each other across oceans.
Specifically, again, only learned fairly recently that Bootsy Collins was in his youth James Brown's bassist. Which is like, I love all that music, so I feel so stupid for not knowing that until recently, and now that's in print. So, whatever. We'll talk about the Shrine, Fela's nightclub in Lagos, but Bootsy Collins said, we were telling them, meaning Fela and the band, they're the funkiest cats we ever heard in our life. I mean, this is the James Brown band saying it, but we were totally wiped out. So like there was a feedback loop and a high level of respect. Miles Davis even said he was a life transforming artist. And in the documentary, they talked about, they put him in a very small category of like the most important Black music post World War II.
Yeah.
With James Brown and the JBs, with P-Funk, with the Wailers, and then Africa 70, like very small Mount Rushmore of all around seismic, influential, culture shaping music.
Almost like it gives you a glimpse that the struggles of the world all the way around are really classist struggles. Wow.
And it's all maybe a little bit tied into Africa in some way too.
And money. Weird. It's almost like we know exactly what's going on everywhere.
Number 3 will shock you.
This is where it gets so fascinating to talk about. Sorry, I'm kind of like sitting here with my hands trying to work my way through it. It gets fascinating to think about how in Western culture, especially when we begin to see the rise of a star, they begin to experience like separation from everyone who is not now kind of famous and rich. Mm-hmm. And generally, when you leave out the farcical stuff about, Willie Nelson's RV getting pulled over for weed and stuff, generally speaking, you enter a new class, right? When you become famous or rich or whatever, or, rich people love you. You enter their class. And it's a little...
And the rules don't apply to you no more.
I mean, yeah. Like things shift in a way where you become kind of more protected because you're gaining money, you're gaining status, you're gaining influence, all that stuff. Now, clearly, that could have been a result of Fela's progress, especially up to that point. I mean, literally, you've got the most famous musicians of that time calling you a world-changing artist. And so what's important to see here is the constant.
Paul McCartney said when he saw Africa 70 at the Shrine, he wept openly.
Oh, because he realized he wasn't actually that good at all. Yeah. Sorry, Paul McCartney's okay. But Africa 70 should make him cry.
I'm a long way from Liverpool.
Oh, man. But what's important to see here, and is a critical context for kind of what we were talking about earlier with just like the kind of complexity and ambiguity of his life choices over time. It's like, okay, he didn't get left alone like a Western person would. He got arrested and beat by the Nigerian police
In the hundreds
of times. Yeah. So to just like put that back into context, okay? If you get beat 200 times over 4 years, that's a beating a week. Like, he is constantly getting, words like bombarded don't really deal with it, right? He is constantly getting interrupted, bothered, abused, whatever, by the corrupt individuals who he is, every time they beat him, more encouraged to speak out about in public, naming names, everything. And so there was this kind of constant.
Okay, imagine like David Bowie getting his shit kicked.
Yeah. Once. You know?
Like try that exercise with anyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Try it with Duran Duran. I don't know who's the biggest. Try with Michael Jackson even. What happens if Michael Jackson gets his ass kicked for We Are the World?
I feel like this puts it in kind of sharp relief. Like, think about Rage Against the Machine even.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone who is openly antagonistic. Now imagine LAPD beat them mercilessly in front of groups of people.
Like Rodney King level beating.
Yeah.
Over and over and over in full view of the public, unapologetically and without remorse.
And I fucking hate extrapolations like that of just like, well, what if so-and-so did it instead? Can you imagine? Like, that's a really unhelpful thing. So there's no need to try to imagine exactly what would happen. Only just that we all know intuitively that would go very different than they came back the following week to beat them again. And then the following week for years and years and years. And so it's not only does this build,
it would maybe be to the level of like Oprah getting her ass beat or getting
like
the MLK letters from the FBI type of thing. Just unimaginably large and beloved the world over, so to speak, societally by everybody except the people in power.
Yeah. And so clearly that accumulates over time. That not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, certainly takes a toll. And for Fela, at least if you believe him and believe the other people who talked about him, I mean, he kind of continued, he used those moments and that kind of abuse as fuel to keep going and got more and more intense until eventually, like, it hit a really specific and sharp moment where, you know, you mentioned his mother earlier and how big of an influence she was on him. And how, I mean, I think there was a lot to dig up between the documentaries and other things about Fela that, like, his mother really provided him specifically with the strength that he drew on to keep pushing back on corruption. And that was his kind of lifeline to applying his energy to this over and over and over and over.
And not just figuratively.
Right.
She moved into the compound with him and like kind of kept him on the rails, tacitly endorsed his lifestyle a little or tolerated it because there was such a sort of understanding between them that what they were doing in their lineage was so important to the liberation of all people. It's like, I love my mom and I know she would do anything for me, but I can't imagine that if it was like, I'm prepared to martyr myself politically on behalf of what I believe in, that my mom would be like, okay, I'll move in with you and do the laundry.
Yeah. And after you had been arrested and beaten, encourage you to go back and do it again.
Right.
Harder.
Right.
Like that's a pretty different thing. And so you've got somebody really drawing on that and having that kind of close connection. And then eventually stuff with the police escalated until she was thrown from a second-story window.
Yes. So that's after the point of this record, just to situate it in context.
Yeah.
Not only was there a scenario where that happened, so Fela had Fela's compound was like right kind of in the thick of things in this neighborhood in Lagos. And it was sort of like the way in Atlanta, you can see the Brave Stadium right from the highway. It's like accessible, right? So Lagos already has this huge traffic problem because of the oil corruption. They mentioned that a lot of people have gotten cars and they've done nothing to deal with it from an infrastructure perspective. Anyway, that's a lot of inside baseball. The point is, basically every military cop in Lagos descends on his commune. It's like 1,000 cops, they said.
Yeah.
And that created such a jam up that like everybody in the area got out of their cars and like descended on the thing. So it was an arena's worth of people. It was like 30,000 people by their estimation circling this compound, watching this violence unfold. Just, it was like the Rodney King thing, except if everybody watching it on TV had been there physically in person, experiencing it at the same time. And they lit his shit on fire. This compound where like 200 people lived and coexisted.
Yeah, and worked, and like he supported them and hired a lot of people and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, this wasn't like a weird like sex cult situation.
It was a little that,
it
but
was,
that wasn't like the primary.
Well, the last half of my sentence though was just like, but it
this is the
featured
first half. Not gonna lie,
it featured a lot more of the supporting aspects of a community.
That's
as
right.
Well, yeah,
there was an extreme level of mutual aid on display.
Yeah, so I'm just making the point that like burning this complex didn't like liberate a bunch of people who didn't want to be there.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. He hired people from the neighborhood, from what was like kind of a rough neighborhood, where it was said by his kids, by a number of people, that like if they hadn't been brought into the fold, they would have been doing crime. Probably they would have been boosting cars and stuff. But he brought him in a lot of times when he didn't need to, and like had them be plumbers or mechanics, or he would have his band teach them instruments and they would either play or they would do some function at the shrine, or they became part of the road crew or whatever. He pulled people in to try to help them. So he was sort of a class elevator. He was like a liberator by being an elevator. He was trying to lift people out of poverty and be a rising tide. And that was dangerous because there's quite literally strength in numbers.
Yeah, and so to your point, actually, we can kind of make a double point here because I mean this part of the story is just sad, right? Like they murdered his mom.
She didn't die immediately.
Right.
She died from complications resulting directly from that a year later.
Yeah,
in like 1977 or 70.
Yeah, it did take a while, but they knew that it was directly related to complications from that. So. Actually, to give you another entry point, if we've already hooked you, Zombie that came. Sorry, now I'm saying it like he says it in the song. Zombie. So Zombie came out in 1977.
Yeah, and we debated. We could have just as easily done that
Absolutely.
record, but wanted to back it up just a little to more of an inflection point. But if you are at all interested, can't stress highly enough that you listen to expensive shit, but you would be very well served to listen to Zombie as well.
Yep.
Certainly hope you do both.
Yep. Observation is No Crime is an awesome song. I love that one.
That's definitely one of my favorites for sure.
Yep.
That's got such a weird, slow groove. An impossible to replicate groove.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every groove feels overly simple and impossible to ever replicate somehow.
Yeah. Try to play literally any of these beats on your hand.
Maybe when no one's around,
Definitely when no one's around.
But yeah, so Zombie came out in 77 and was believed to have caused the swarm or encouraged the swarm on the compound, which resulted in the destruction of all this property and the eventual murder of his mother.
The zombies are the military police.
Yeah.
His thesis was that people won't be afraid of them if you make fun of them. So he was belittling them for being mindless lemmings in a war that they knew nothing about.
Yep, that they only go where
didn't
they're
benefit
told.
from.
Yeah. But it's worth fast forwarding those couple of years to see this progression, because that really became another defining moment where, we talk a lot about kind of like using historical lenses to go back and see things anew. And so for us to know that all of this happened, that he is releasing music that is literally resulting, and the destruction of his life and property, he didn't stop. It didn't shift. He didn't hide. He lost possibly the most important person in the world to him. And certainly, by the way, other people tell it, had to take some time to deal with that. But
And his livelihood, like his his place that he lived and supported others, all the money that he lost in that, and the 16-track studio. Not that any of that compares to the loss of the most important person in his life, but it was a tremendous amount, a backbreaking amount of loss and grief. Certainly that was the point of the exercise, right?
Yep.
And not only did they not break him, but he came back harder than ever.
Yeah, and he continued to do pretty wild stuff going forward to make whatever points were probably applicable inside of his cultural context at that time. Some of the stories are like, I just don't think I'm ever going to really understand that totally. But
go just one further. Just indulge me and go one further to Coffin for Head of State, where when his mother died, they walked her coffin through a processional through the middle of Lagos, accompanied by people numbering in the thousands, chanting, and walked it straight up to the steps of the Capitol and dropped it there so that she could face directly the president who they believed, who they knew confidently was responsible for her death because he himself authorized the military raid. Like, think about that in a modern context of like dropping somebody's mom's coffin on the steps of the Capitol in DC, and just like, one, how that would never fucking happen in a million years now. But two, just like, who would have the courage of conviction and the total disregard for their own life to make that strong a move?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna turn the screw just a little harder, because hearing that story made me think about, so America, like a lot of countries, but specifically we're number one. We love war crimes. We love them, and we do them.
And biking, which is it's a war crime in its own way.
It's
a war crime for your mouth.
Yep. Jeez. We're gonna let that drift off. While we were listening to this record a lot, like one of the things that came out recently was, I think it was the New York Times, who I hate talking about positively, but I think they were able to, through a Freedom of Information Act, get the real video of the drone strike that we recently did. Accidentally killed 10 civilians. And fun fact, we did a whole investigation, literally no smiles on our faces, no smirk, no wink. Dude walks out and says, we did a full investigation and can't find that anyone did anything wrong. So that's kind of where we're at.
NRPI, baby, no real person involved.
Well, point being, what struck me about this, and in terms of what you were just saying about, can you imagine? Like, to me, in that moment that I read about this, because I was thinking about this story, I was like, I bet everyone wouldn't be able to be so casual about killing women and children who weren't involved in anything if they were brought to the steps of the Capitol and just laid right in front of us and went, hey, that thing that we all said was okay, as a big company, big country full of 300 plus million people who say that we're doing things.
That's a great Freudian slip, calling us a company first.
Companies are people too. For us to have made that choice, like, we have such a distance from the ramifications of that because no one ever makes us see it. No one ever brings it back.
The closest we ever get is like the 100,000 white crosses for the people who died of COVID.
Yeah.
Like that weird empty symbolism means nothing. It's not somebody's dad turned upside down on a table, intubated, it's visceral.
Yep.
That's why funerals are important, because of the visceral response of the body.
Well, and to that end, wow, I didn't think we would say, like funerals, fellas music, but it is very much like no, don't look away. No, it's right here. Yeah. No, look at it. Fella had talked offhand in a number of interviews or whatever, where he just kind of talked about, like, I'm never really talking about anything.
Right.
It's like, well, clearly you are. Like, we know exactly what you're talking about, right? But he's got this kind of approach of like, think about all the stuff we've talked about with Afrobeat so far and being influenced by funk, or even having aspects of like drone or other forms of dance music, like this physicality of music where, like we said, he's doing a bunch of 10, 20-minute songs. So it becomes not only physical, but cyclical and You've got a real rhythm to it that sets in for a real long period of time. And once he finally does drop in with vocals, he's just kind of talking about exactly what it is he wants to talk about without a lot of like, fluffy language or anything like that. So like in that sense, it really is like the kind of open casket of music. Like, no. We're not having fun so much as we are gathered here together and we all matter. And this is how we communicate what we need to communicate. This is how we build revolution. This is how we build community with one another. We're here, and this music provides this impossibly thin veneer over I'm actively stirring up a riot all of the time with everyone who's at this show. I'm actively being a dissident all of the time. But as opposed to, again, I think Western iterations of this where we think of like Rage Against the Machine is the easy cartoon version kind of, right? But like we, with our Western music, we think of like, if you're going to be confrontational, angular, punk, dissident, that has to be expressed through the musicality.
Yeah.
And it results in a shift in genre. It's got to be fast or loud or aggressive or dissonant. No such rules apply here. Not only because it's not Western music, but on top of that, it's Fela Kuti, and he doesn't really care about what any of that looks like. It's a moment, even more so than any of the moments we've talked about in music before. Like, this is a far more communal, get in here and look at this for a while. And then after this, we're going to feel a way, and then we're going to take care of one another.
I want to tie in a couple of musical threads that are interesting to me in that context. Coming from the family background that he was in, the documentary mentioned how the presence of religion or whatever had them steeped in chants and liturgical ritual music. So there is sort of like an ecstatic reach upward that he understands really intuitively, but somebody said specifically that's what gives his music the feeling of levity, is like trying to reach for something higher.
Yeah.
Always. And I know, like, having grown up playing music in the church, you kind of get a little bit of a sense of that. But also there's a quote on his website, and whoever does his like presence now in the world, his children and their team, kudos to them, because I think it's one of the few truly amazing jobs of like somebody that's not making music anymore, catalog music, so to speak. And it's pulled into the present really beautifully.
Yeah.
The box sets, the digital presence, all of it. Kudos to you. On the website, one of his quotes is, "Music is a spiritual thing. You don't play music. If you play with music, you will die young. When the higher forces give you the gift of musicianship, it must be used well for the good of humanity." So, a little bit like music has to be for revolution, but there's a higher aim baked in immediately. And there's sort of the musical aim, and then the lyrical, I think, unlock for me is his very deliberate language choices.
Yeah. Deliberate's a great way to put it.
Is the lingua franca. There's lots and lots and lots of different languages spoken on the African continent, and certainly lots more once you radiate beyond that. Knowing the mass appeal that his music needed to have, the choice to switch between Yoruba and like kind of a pidgin blend and English was to allow him to like encode and ingratiate himself with the groups he was trying to reach directly, connect on a deep level, but also go wide. So when it can be kind of hard for somebody who like only lives in the West ever and only speaks English, like not knowing a lot of what's going on lyrically, there's a ton, if you are a multilingual, multicultural person, there's a ton to pick up there.
If your head is hot, the water could cool 'em. Tomo bandagba, oh miloma lo. If your child they grow, the water him go use. If water kill your child, the water you go use.
The language is definitely something worth sitting with if you don't have exposure to this type of music or this approach to language. Because yeah, to your point, like the kind of mishmash of language approaches is jarring because he finds a way to be so direct with it. But at the same time, like, it's really cyclical. There's kind of like a playfulness to it though, as well, where, I mean, let's go straight into the lyrics of this album that we picked out, okay? Because eventually the people who have maybe been listening to us for the last 45 minutes are gonna hop onto this record and hear the chorus.
Because why you?
Because you shoot the smell.
Because why you?
Because you shoot the smell.
Upon a monkey for Yoruba land. Him go bend the ash, him go shit. Him go come out away from him shit. Him shit go be the last way him go like to see. Because why you?
They're gonna thank us for turning them on to something so intellectually stimulating. But like, that's such a good example because like the story behind expensive shit, the phrase itself, right? Is because like the police were trying to frame him. They tried to plant a joint on him. Apparently he was constantly too smart.
Which meant the penalty for that in Nigeria at the time was 10 years in jail.
Yeah.
For possession of any level of grass.
You could get death for a certain level of possession. Like,
very, very not chill, man.
yeah, cool stuff. So it's Sweden and Nigeria now. Great. So they try to plant a joint on him. He, as a legend goes, but I feel like it's pretty well backed up to feel like a true story. He knows they plant a joint on him and he eats it.
It's also validated because it's happened to at least one other artist in very recent times in Nigeria. This tactic.
Oh, I thought you were making a
by the
Super
police.
Troopers reference. Okay.
Fela Kuti presents schnozberries.
Oh, man. So he eats the joint. They know fucking cops, man.
What episode of Atlanta is it where Darius is like, I ate that joint, I need to go inside now. It's about to get weird. Like that part of this doesn't come into the story at all, where he just ate a joint and was fine.
Right. Yeah, I think he was probably pretty experienced. So, but so he eats the joint to evade getting arrested. Cops are undeterred and await his shit so they can detect the marijuana in it, because that is a way that they can, cops across the world feel that if they smell marijuana in anything, that now they have free range to search it. So,
and seize your property.
man, I love this story. So it keeps going. So the cops are now waiting for him to shit.
In a slop bucket.
Yep. And he's there in front of them. Like they're monitoring him, waiting on him to shit. And he manages somehow to get the shit of someone else
To Ocean's 11, a shit swap.
and pass it off as his own in a way that actually causes the cops who are there trying to prevent it from not being able to further prosecute it. And he gets out and he writes a
Innocent
song.
until proven shitty.
And he writes a song called Expensive Shit because hopefully whoever shit that was well taken care of, I guess, but also because if he hadn't gotten this shit out, I guess it could have been expensive for him in a number of ways. There's just a really good, like,
Once it dawned on me that it was like expensive in terms of being a massive misuse of police resources. Just like, oh man, that's sick burn, bro.
yep, everything about it.
And two other sort of fun symbolic things happened. Alagbon Close is the name of the police headquarters, but the big communal cell, the tank that they put him in, they called it was affectionately, hard air quotes, called the Calcutta Republic. Calcutta being Swahili for rascal. So like, oh, you rascal, you ended up at Calcutta again. When he was released, he renamed the commune Calcutta Republic as just sort of a big, like, come back and see me at my own big communal cell anytime you want. And they did. Spoiler alert.
So good.
Oh, but then he also, maybe this was before that, he changed his middle name to Enakalapo, or he who carries death in his pouch. Renamed his commune after the jail, named his middle name as like the ultimate taunt. He who cannot be killed by mortal man.
But I love it too, because when we discussed Mama's Gun, and we talked about being able to apply layers and go back to listen to songs again. And so to me, like having the story of Expensive Shit is like your first listen after knowing what he is talking about is the best. It's a totally new experience now because
the groove's so cocky.
exactly yes.
Oh, it's so powerful.
It's aggressively cocky. Yes. Like it really starts to, you're like, you start dancing because you're like, you fuck you too,
I cannot
bro.
be killed by anything.
The song itself, like it's a really good introduction to the way that they layer in the groove and really kind of trance you out after a while. Because like even in this song, right? Like you've got that one riff that's coming in a lot. It gets joined by percussion. Eventually you get like saxophone, but you get lots of stuff that gets like layered in kind of slowly over time. And it's trance is a really good way of thinking about it because like what's really interesting about Fela's music that we joked about like at the top of the episode, it goes on so long to where you kind of forget that he hasn't come in yet. And so like on Expensive Shit, when the vocals kick in at like 6 minutes into this, you're just like, okay. It takes on this whole new body and feeling to it all of a sudden. One aspect that can only be looked at back in reverse that I really love is like, okay, so Expensive Shit is like building the trance. Then he comes in. He's in for like the length of a normal song doing vocals.
Right.
But then, anyway, speaking of the thing that we can only say now, looking back, like around 9 minutes in, there's this piano that comes in, and it is, I could only describe it as the Mars Volta. Like, it's that very almost like dissonant, how many pianos are there in this room type thing, and they're kind of getting layered and getting like squished around and warped, and you can't really tell are effects being put on this, or is this just what happens when you mash a bunch of these things together?
Mm-hmm.
And it just it kind of swirls into this little experimental feeling thing.
Yeah.
Which again, only feels out of place when we approach this from like a Western music perspective. But when we're able to kind of shift, I think, into like what Fela is doing and what Africa 70 is doing and what Afrobeat is in general, well, all of those things fit together exactly right. Like, why would you start at the top of the song with the vocals? Why wouldn't you devolve into something absolutely wild 10 minutes in, you know?
I love that it pulls back and gets quiet. And once you start noticing where it starts to build back up at 11 or 12 minutes, you think it naturally, your Western mind is going to crescendo back down or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and then crashes. And then there's weird atonal piano just by itself at the end. It like does not do dynamically what you think it's going to do at all when you try to concentrate on it, which is, it's very wild. There are a lot of like little change moments too. There's one at like 7.5 minutes or so where there are very subtle, like I've never been a musician in a band, so it's hard for me to think about music this way, but like a moment where there's 2 snare hits and then they go into the next section. There's a level of tightness with this band that's almost indescribable.
Yeah.
Where they are
Holy shit.
telepathic with the changes.
It's impossible to communicate how hard it already is to get that many people together.
13, 16, something.
Bro, anything past 3, it's just like,
absurd,
it's
yeah.
helpless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Past ZZ Top, it's chaos.
And especially for marathon lengths of time without breaks. Like, that's how like his story and his artistry keeps unfolding, right? Like eventually you start looking into it, you're like, well, he's a damn band leader.
Yeah.
Like, he's like doing a better version of James Brown than James Brown is after he saw James Brown like a few times. And he came back here and now he can, you know.
Because James Brown never got handed a saxophone in the middle and just ripped a solo.
He was once.
Respect to the Godfather.
And then a cloud of cocaine appeared in front of the saxophone and James Brown was never allowed to do woodwind again. Brass? Yeah, there we go. Even from probably still in that Finding Fela documentary, but like they would talk about how eventually he came to like he could do the same James Brown-esque thing where like, oh, a turn of his head would indicate to everyone what was happening. And he would look directly at anyone who he felt was not adequately performing that day. A lot of people said this, and just kick them out. You're gone. Replaced. Just like, today is not your day, and now you're out of the band.
They lived in fear of that look.
Yeah.
That was a funny anecdote.
Well, it's always wild too. I think we heard some of this too with Miles Davis when we did Bitches Brew, but like there's something worth paying attention to when professional musicians are talking to you about effectively a dictator, but also saying, I loved it. It was the best I ever did. Best music I ever made. Like they were incredible. Like that's something different than just like an emotionally abusive perfectionist. Like that's someone who is very good at what they're doing and is so good that all the other people who are so good want to come be a part of this despite the emotional abuse.
Most of all being Tony Allen, who belongs at the top of your conversation of musicians to love. Like we talked about Jackie Leibovitz when we talked about Can. You talk about the Mars Volta and John Theodore. Like every great drummer in the history of whenever that you like think of a drummer and their thing is made better by some through line 6 degrees back to Tony Allen, right? Because it goes back to funk and boogie and whatever. Like as much as you need to know about Fela, if you're a music fan, especially if you love groove music, rock, heavy music, whatever, you need to know and study Tony Allen pretty extensively. Questlove is in that documentary. Questlove and OK Player have been active in stewarding the legacy of Fela and of Africa 70 and Egypt 80. But, Questlove is a drummer's drummer, and he said that Tony Allen had the discipline of a Navy SEAL. So not only is it just hard to keep a beat for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, especially without stopping, an Afro beat where the emphasis is never on the one and there's complexity to the pattern always baked in, right? Like we joked about earlier in the episode, like just try to follow the count of one of these beats in your head and then play the pattern. It is not intuitive at all. And arguably the only Western musician who was ever able to do it successfully was Ginger Baker.
Yeah. Who was pretty involved with Fela Kuti too, right? Like the same year. Was he, I can't remember, was Ginger Baker on the record or did he help produce it?
Not this record, was it? Was the other record?
Yes, it was.
He produced it.
I'm thinking of He Misrode, which also came out in 75. Because there were 6 records released in 1975.
Africa 70 was the King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard of the 70s.
Okay, so He Misrode was produced by Ginger Baker, but
at the studio that he helped finance and build.
In
Lagos, the EMI studio.
Apparently they were close friends and would jam.
That's a whole other interesting kind of dynamic. I don't think either one of us have any interest in letting the sort of like Western angle into this thing dominate the narrative, but they did have a really interesting friendship, which is especially acute once you remember that Ginger Baker was like the most acerbic and hated man in rock music. Like nobody likes him and he doesn't like anybody in spite of his massive, overwhelming talent. But when Hendrix died and Cream bottomed out in whatever order, he like went for a road trip that turned into him getting a Land Rover in Algeria and driving straight through the Sahara Desert and winding up in Nigeria and just like jamming with Africa 70 and then becoming kind of best friends with them.
Are you telling me that Ginger Baker Eat Love prayed his way to Fela Kuti?
Oh my God, he kind of did. Ginger Baker in his lifetime neither lived nor laughed nor loved.
Like George Costanza's mom. It's great stuff. And the other track too on this record, Water No Good Enemy, these don't have to be super dissected technically or anything, but I did want to call out, like, I love the way the horns come in. I was telling you before we started recording that, like, I feel like I'm at a college football game, the way that stuff comes in. And that doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever, right? The tie through, aside from marching bands being heavily influenced and driven, as all music is, by historical Black colleges and universities, who were more than likely very aware of Afrobeat or this idea of doing, kind of any of this stuff. But like hearing a unified horn section come in strong with a really good, I also call it a riff, right? But like a really good melody line, it's still rare, even with all of the music that we have, right? You got to go pretty Earth, Wind, and Fire to get that good stuff.
Yeah.
And this one just hits you right out of the gate on that song after you wait just a minute for it to come in. It's funky. It goes through some weird, spacious stuff, but it's another just killer song that you could never kind of expect. You can't, at no point can you do the thing where, because you understand music theory inherently, because you've heard so many Western songs, you can guess the next chord, next progression. There is so little of that here outside of the rhythm. And it's a totally inverted experience of really long, complex physical songs. I wouldn't have thought of this as a record that's like, and play it loud,
Yeah, it's a great one.
but it is.
I got to show love and shout out Tori Edwards, our buddy from Atlanta Influences Everything, who this is like one of his favorite songs. And not long before we decided we were going to do this record, like posted a screenshot of it on his Instagram story. And I was like, man, I think we're gonna do this record. And he was just like, this groove, man, this groove.
Yeah.
And right before we started recording, I said that, this podcast has made me fall in love with like get new favorite songs that under no other circumstance would I have been like, this goes on my jukebox at my house.
Yeah.
The other absurd example being Hallelujah by Can, like 18 minutes of acid frenzy. But Water No Good Enemy is like one of my favorite songs now. Like,
It's so good.
It's in my bones for real.
I just walk around now. Ba-da-ba, ba-da.
And the groove is like water. It moves.
Yeah.
It moves very fluidly. The same way that we talked about in Sleep's Dope Smoker, the groove on that feels like walking arbitrarily through the sand
Shit,
and
you
getting
did
away
it.
from
You connected these two things,
Sleep
and
and
that was
Fela.
totally legit.
Congratulations.
We did it.
I've completed, I've filled in the Cliff Seal circle.
We've connected the people who tried the hardest and the people who didn't try the hardest together over one long thread.
So I love that these two songs are the songs on this record, because there's a contrast in the message, a direct diametrical opposition to the messages of these two songs, like almost like a problem solution. So Expensive shit's like foul, right? It's aggressive. It's an in your face message, and Water by contrast being pure and also sacred, especially in the African context. There's like spiritual sacredness about water as a symbol. But specifically, I think a piece of context that was important for me to learn is that the Yoruba hold the strong belief that nobody can be an enemy of water. Like that's a saying in Yoruba culture, hence the saying, everyone must drink water, use water for cooking food, bathing, washing clothes, and other items. Whoever uses water for any purpose cannot claim to be an enemy of water. Therefore, by the transitive property, whoever uses water must not be an enemy of the person being prayed for with water. So there's some like
Everyone listening to this just hit the 30-second back button. It's like, what was that again?
yeah, it's a tight coil of a hits
Dense
blunt
sentence.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you start to unpack it, and like I totally had to do the what, like and I read one thing and understood 10% less and had to like work my way out of that whole 10 or 12. And before I knew it, I was like downloading a PDF about sayings in Yoruban culture from like an African American studies department. So we did that for you, y'all. No, I did that exclusively for me because that's the kind of music fan that I am. But essentially, I got to a really concise sort of summary that somebody said that it's really about water as a metaphor to suggest that the government should go with the flow of the people, right? It's all about power and the solidarity struggle, and that everybody should be more like water and go with the flow and not try to exercise too much control. Which is like, that's tight as hell.
Yep.
And to come away with that message on the flip side of like direct punk flippancy against a piece of direct action is like, I couldn't love that more. Couldn't be a better holistic outlook. The kind of two things taken in totality.
And to that end, I think at the risk of being a little fluffy or crunchy here, like I think one thing that anyone listening to this can kind of take from us that we will also continue to do, it's like, we got to talk about this music. we literally have to talk about Africa 70, Fela Kuti, and everything that was around. We've got to talk about this more. This has to be a more direct and known and visible influence in how we talk about the progression of music, how we talk about the things that we learned, but also importantly, in like Kyle, something that you had mentioned, you know, in the weeks of us kind of talking about this stuff, it's like, it's important to find ways not to let his legacy be not only diminished or dismissed, but co-opted. And that's why it was important to lay out as much kind of nuance as we have about this, because it's, yeah, there are angles or details or whatever that could be problematic. They can be problematic. That's fine. Yep. Like, there's still this much bigger thing here that we have to continue to pay attention to, because as we like jokingly say, but is also true, like Fela's struggle of class struggle against corruption of people who use violence to get money and keep it and use it to accumulate power. That is the struggle that American civil rights icons went through. Apartheid, like all of this stuff, right, is driven by like, sometimes race is our corollary so that we can, like in America, right, like those things align, but like the struggle is class. Or if you want to go further into this, read Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Mm-hmm. But being able to basically do what we did, I'd love to encourage you to do more of what we did, in the sense of, don't just dive further into expensive shit or Zombie or Fela Kuti in general or anything, or Afrobeat. Don't just dive into it in the same way that you can with a lot of the other records we're talking about, where, I mean, yes, you're going to get personally fulfilled shit jams, dude. Like, it's fun. It's like, literally, it's fun to listen to. It's fun to put on. It's fun to talk to other people about. But like, also, I think there should be a seriousness and intentionality that you take, that we want to compel you towards, that says, no, like, this is important because it's important. And because he was important, and because his music was important, and because this struggle and this idea of pushing back against corruption is important, we're going to talk about it. So like, I'm going to tell someone new, I'm going to like evangelize Fela Kuti. Like, go tell someone new who likes music, who you know doesn't know shit about this record, put it on their Spotify, drop it in their lap, dude. Like, more people just need to be, without context or even nuance, just dropped into Afrobeat, so that you can like start to be a part of what was happening and help represent it. Because a Broadway musical helped bring his life from another continent to ours. But like, anytime we find someone or something worth celebrating and exploring, we should not let a musical be the only way that we do that. Not to mention the fact that, like, for irony's sake, right at the beginning of Finding Fela, someone says, like, Fela's music is like the opposite of a musical. So, like, there are just so many ways where, like, it's worth bringing up this body of work in, like, conversation. You don't have to make a point or defend it. It's like, more people need to know about this. Like, this needs to spread. And like, even we, as people who generally knew something about Fela Kuti, we knew a few records here or there, whatever. Like, I think you'd agree. Like, I feel more compelled than ever to be able to represent more of this work, so that if anyone has any idea about it, I can encourage them to keep learning more. And if they don't know about it, I can introduce them to this whole new approach to music that really doesn't have a corollary in our modern Western music at all. There's nothing like this.
Go to tunedig.com for your chance to win a free vinyl copy of the album we just covered. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter for even more info about the album, including playlists, links to interesting articles and videos, and even some stories that didn't make the episode. Most importantly, though, please support your favorite local record store or concert venue, or buy merch from a band you love. Thanks for listening.